Hello everyone. I wanted to share some great things that I read in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna actually yesterday. There's this idea, that God isn't real, that he can't be seen, or that we take things only on faith. And I was reading last night, and the Master says, Sri Ramakrishna says when he's asked, he says, yes, God can be seen, and then he doesn't tell the name of the person, but he says X has had a vision of God, but don't tell anyone about it, because it causes quite an uproar. And he goes on to tell us here, let me get to the right page for it. He gives us some wonderful clues about how to go about seeing it. Now, it's quite an effort to see the beloved face to face, and I think, quite honestly, that the idea that there is no God is certainly much easier to digest, because you don't have to do anything. You can just say, I don't believe in God, and that's that. You don't have to study, you don't have to discipline, you don't have to work, you don't have to do anything. So it's a very convenient stance to take in the face of what I think is amazing evidence. Now, when I speak about God, of course, in my world, in my ideas, God is not a man in the sky kind of image. It's, he is that existence, that love, that purity, that intelligence that allows us to understand what we see in our mind, that allows us to understand and see and experience the world around us. But he says, to see God, he says, you must practice spiritual discipline a little. It will not do simply to say that milk contains butter. You must let the milk set into curd and then churn it. Only then you can get butter from it. Spiritual aspirants must go into solitude every now and then. After acquiring love of God and solitude, they may live in the world. If one is wearing a pair of shoes, one can easily walk over the thorns. The most important thing is faith. As is a man's meditation, so is his feeling of love. As is a man's feeling of love, so is his gain. And faith is the root of all. If one has faith, one has nothing to fear. And faith, what is faith? Faith is not believing something with no evidence for it. That's certainly not the meaning of faith. Faith is this intuitive understanding. It's the reason that we can't comprehend our own death. It's the reason we can't think of our own birth. It's, I always like to say that there's two things that we brought into this world with us that the world could not have taught us through experience. The idea of immortality and the idea of infinity, neither of which exist in the natural world. And if the mind really was just a product of the inputs from the senses, those ideas are not inherent in our experience, or are actually completely outside of our experience. And the mind can't produce something outside of experience, or at least a combination of experiences. So faith is this intuitive knowing, just an understanding within, or a belief within somehow, that there's more to this than it appears. And, it's trusting the teacher enough to do what the teacher is telling you to do in order to find the truth. It's not necessarily swallowing the truth whole without any investigation. It's holding on to the idea. You go to your calculus class with the idea that you're going to learn calculus. You have faith that your teacher is going to be able to teach you calculus, and that by the end of the class you're going to know calculus. Now, that's the kind of faith, I think, that the Master is talking about. It's having the faith that this is possible enough that I'm going to do the investigation. I am going to do the experiment. My life is going to be an experiment, an investigation into the nature of reality. Not necessarily for the search for God, because that sort of defines the outcome, which isn't fair, but at least an investigation into the nature of existence, into the nature of being. And he gives us some wonderful pointers here. He says that you have to make an effort. It's not enough to say that there's butter in the milk. That doesn't create a stick of butter. You have to do the churning. You have to do the work. You have to make the effort in order to bring out the butter in there. And he talks here, he says, the most important thing, as is a man's meditation, so is his feeling of love. So going inward. Why is that? Because your nature is love. We talk about that over and over and over again, but never enough, in my mind. That love that exists within you, that meditation allows that to come out, allows that to manifest. It stills the mind, which defines things and routes that love that is you, that puts a refracting lens on it by the time it comes out of your mouth. It has to go through a mind, and depending on how clear the mind is, you just get a lot of trash out of a lot of people's mouths, and you get a lot of love out of others. And Ramakrishna is saying here, as is a man's meditation, so is his feeling of love. That gives rise to what Vivekananda says. There's only two measures for how spiritual you are. Are you unselfish? That's the first. And the second is, are you loving? The first is just a response sort of thing. Are you selfish? Are you taking? But just not taking isn't enough. Are you loving? Are you giving? Are you outgoing in your caring? Are you putting action into your nature, as it were? So as is a man's meditation, so is his feeling of love. And as is a man's feeling of love, so is his gain. That's what Vivekananda is talking about. That's your measure. The strength of your love is a determining factor in how spiritual you are. Not how many scriptures you know, not how many, whatevers. There's all kinds of those smug little things that we like to do. The trouble is comparing ourselves to others. If you are content where you are because you've compared yourself to others, you're lost. In that sense, that's no measure. That's by and large, that only measures the people that you know and the assumptions that you've made about them. It doesn't say anything about yourself. The only measure is, are you unselfish? Are you loving? If one has faith, one has nothing to fear. He goes on to say that there's this meditation. One should constantly repeat the name of God. The name and the form are one and the same. You can't draw the name of something without bringing up the image or inspiring the ideal of that something in your mind. So by repeating the name of God, if God doesn't have a name, use the name love. Just repeat the name love over and over and over, just constantly bringing out that ideal, putting the mind on that ideal, and it will serve as a comb. Hafiz has a poem about saying the name of God or singing the names of God, where he says that each time that you say the name of God, it's like pouring your mind through a cheesecloth. That each time God's name is mentioned, each time you put that comb through your hair, things are more clear. The arrangement of mind is better. So he says one should constantly repeat the name of God. Always, 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 under any circumstance, for any reason possible, just have it going in your mind. One should always seek the company of holy men, people who, or women, obviously, that one should always seek the company of people who are loving and who are caring, who are like what you want to be like, people who inspire you in the way that you want and need to be inspired. So hang out with those people. Look for those people's company. They will help you to get your mind into a clarity. But one cannot achieve anything through laziness and procrastination. People who desire worldly enjoyment say about spiritual progress, well, it will happen in time. We shall realize God sometime or other. You don't have that attitude about things that you love, things that you enjoy. So don't have those things about your spiritual practice. Don't have that attitude about your spiritual practice. It is said in this age that if a man can weep for God one day and one night, he will see him. Feel upset at God and say to him, you've created me, now you must reveal yourself to me. Whether you live in the world or elsewhere, always fix the mind on God and go forward. Go forward. Don't stop the quest. Sometimes in spiritual life you get a little nugget of something, a nice feeling, certainly a sense of peace. Sorry, I threw that right in the sun and it reflected right in my face. But sometimes we get a little token of spiritual advancement, or we become known and respected for our spirituality. And then we get complacent. We got something that the mind and the senses wanted, but we haven't manifested ourselves yet. So don't get complacent. Don't think that you've arrived. When you arrive, you will know. You will know. And actually, the idea of arriving is sort of a misnomer anyway. God is not something to be achieved. He's not a destination. He's your isness. You are where you are. Even when you're realized, you'll be in the same place. But there's a knowing that's far different. There's a knowing that's far different. A perspective that's far different. You look at the great sages, Saint Teresa of Avila, Saint John of the Cross, Ramakrishna, Buddha. You look at their lives, they were lost in ecstasy. They were lost in loving, lost in caring. And what a beautiful impact on the world around them. Hold that ideal before you today and let everything remind you of the beloved. Let everything remind you that the soul of the universe is love. The soul of the universe is intelligence. And you have the great fortune today of existence, the ability to see it, the ability to live it, the ability to manifest it, the ability to get lost in it. So for today, look for God in all things. Keep that name, keep that ideal in your mind throughout the day. Seek out the company, of course 6 feet plus between you, of like-minded people, and serve. Become unselfish, manifest love. May God bless us in all of these things today. May we be that ideal. May we be what we have always wanted to be.